All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we are live. Welcome everyone joining me on the various channels that I'm streaming on, including the CC Design channel today. Today we're going to be talking about how to background from an image, or more importantly, how to take your main subject and put them on a different background. So all of the above. Before we jump right into it, and hey Felix, what's going on? Hey Victoria. And hey, Dollar, what's in Bangladesh, and welcome everyone else. Before we jump into it too heavily, let me explain a couple concepts that will help you in all your future background removal, image swapping efforts. The most successful image extractions happen because of contrast. In other words, your subject is a good contrast against whatever background it's on. If you were trying to remove black hair from a black background, that's going to be hard. That's going to be challenging. There is no magic to that. But if you were trying to remove blonde hair from a white background, that'd be a lot easier. Or blonde hair from a blue background, that'd be a lot easier. So the contrast is what really makes the difference. Now, doesn't have to be on a solid background. We're going to remove something that's not on a solid background, but there is contrast. There is a color difference. If the color difference is not that great, it's going to be harder. It's not going to be an easy task, especially if the subject does have hair. That's what makes it challenging. So with that said, let me switch over to my computer so you guys can see what I'm doing. I've got a background already in place. This is the background that I want to move my new subject onto. This is not the one I want to cut out from. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Photoshop. I've got the two images open right now in tabs. We're going to take the subject and just take the existing background and everything over to this image. So let me show you what the subject is. Let's get my mouse over here. And the subject is this one. It's Marna, in a wooded or marsh kind of background. So this looks like it's more from the beach. This looks like it's more from a desert, or just a more sun-baked kind of background. And I want to take her with her flowing hair in the wind and everything and put her over here. Now, in order for that to happen, like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and take the entire image over there. Then I'll worry about getting rid of the background once I've got it in place. So to do that, when you're working with, well, let me show you a couple ways. If your image is not open in Photoshop, you can now just drag an image right in. So you can just drag it right in from the operating system. In my case, I'm on the Mac, so from the Finder, or if you're on Windows, Windows Explorer, just drag it in. Boom, it comes in. You can size it. You can get it where you want, move it around, and then once you click away in the new Photoshop, that will auto commit. So there it is, and I'd be able to take the background out. Now, let's get rid of that one, because let's say your image is already open, like I have it open in another tab. How do I get this image over to that? So there's a couple of ways. I always usually do a drag and drop, but there's a way to do it from the layers panel too. So drag and drop would look like this. If you wanted to pick up the entire image, now keep in mind, there's no layer, it's just a background. If I start dragging and I drag all the way up to that tab and hold it for a second, it'll switch. Don't let go. If you let go right now, nothing will happen. You have to drag down into the image, anywhere in the image, before you let go. So my mouse is now just up here by the clouds. And as long as I'm dragging around near the clouds, when I let go, there it comes. So as drag up to the tab, wait for that image to pop open, drag down into the image and let go, and then your subject will be there. Now I said there's a way to do it from the layers panel too. Let's go to the layers panel. This is an older method I used when the subject isn't easy to grab. Like for example, maybe it was on a layer that was buried between multiple layers, not easy to pick it up and move it. So you can right click on this one and duplicate layer. When you duplicate the layer, it'll ask you, where do you want to duplicate it? I want to duplicate it to the other image. So when I click OK, I don't have to do anything but just go over there because it's already there, because I duplicated it. So whether you do a drag and drop from the operating system, or duplicate layer, that will all result in a new layer on your on top of your existing background. Now in this case, she's a little bit bigger, a lot bigger. She's a little bit bigger than the existing background. So in that case, I need to scale her down. So now I'm going to hit Command T on Mac, PC, that'd be Control T. That will give me free transform. But the problem with free transform in this case is my handles are outside the image area. The image is so big, I can't even see the handles at the bottom. So I'm going to hit Command 0. That's PC Control 0. That will always expose all your handles. No matter how small it has to make everything, it will show you all the handles so you can grab. And of course, we're in the newest version of Photoshop where I don't have to hold down the Shift key anymore. I can scale proportionally without holding down the Shift key and get this scale down to about the size I'd want. I want it a little bit, not too much bigger than that tree, but keep in mind that tree is in the distance. So we're going to make her a little smaller yet. And also in this particular image, let me zoom back up. I can't start at the bottom of the image because she has no feet. She has no legs. The legs are covered up and I don't have any other image of her legs to build it back up. So in this case, we're going to sacrifice and pull it down so that we're not exposed. Because once I cut away all that green, she'd just be floating in midair. There would be no feet or legs to put her on. So in this case, I'm just going to pull this down a bit. So that we don't have to worry about that because her legs will just be naturally cut off by the edge of the image. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind is that if you're bringing something over, like for example, we often photograph portraits where it's tight on the portrait and maybe the edge of the frame is right against the person's arm. Well, in that case, if you're not going to put it against the edge of your new image, then you have arm you'd have to rebuild or copy from the other arm or do something to get it that way. So if you have parts of your image that are cut off by the edge of the image, then you got to do the same thing when you bring it over to your new image. Whether it's the sides, the top of the head, the bottom, whatever it is, just keep that in mind. All right, so now that I got it in place, I'm just going to click away because I can auto commit that way now in Photoshop CC for 2019. And here, let's zoom in some more. This now becomes the challenge. She's on this cloudy background from the past. And she's got hair, and we want to bring her onto the new background without all of this foliage, without all of this cloudiness, without all of any of that old background. Now in the past, 3 weeks ago, I would have reached for the quick select, actually no, longer than that. 6 months ago, I would have reached for the quick select tool and I would start making a selection of her. And I'm doing a very good job here. We're on that layer, right? All right. I would start making a selection. I'm not sure why I'm selecting the entire image. It shouldn't be. But anyway, I would start making that selection of her and it would start selecting. It should just select just her. This is the old way. I'm not going to do it this way anyway, but I'm just wondering why that's not. I was trying to select the whole thing, even though I don't have, even though I'm on that layer. So let's make this brush a little bit bigger. Yeah, that should just be selecting her. I'm not sure why it's not. But yeah, it would normally look like this, where it would not have selected everything. It would have selected just her. Anyway, we're not going to do it that way. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to be on the select subject tool, but we're going to be on a quick select tool, but we're going to use the select subject to make our selection. So when I click on select subject, that will use Adobe Sensei to figure out what the subject is and make that selection for us. So this is using the artificial intelligence inside of Photoshop to make a selection for us. Now in this case, like all things automatic, it's not perfect. It did a great job. It was, especially with the quick select working the way it was working just now. I should probably go reset that tool, by the way. Yeah, let's reset this tool. Reset tool. Okay, anyway, now that I reset the tool, it should work the way it used to. But anyway, now that I've got this selected, I can see some little parts where it didn't do a great job. For example, it didn't do a great job inside of her hair. It missed some of her hair. It didn't do a great job in this little corner where her arm is. That's okay. It's grabbing a little bit of that foliage down here, and it maybe didn't even get the rest of her eye. And that's not okay. So we're going to go ahead and add that back in. Not with that tool, but we're going to add that back in a minute. Anyway, next up. So now that I've got a quick selection done, whether you did it with the quick select tool, the lasso, the magic wand, any one of those tools, whatever you, or select subject, what we're going to do next is select and mask. So when I click on select and mask, which is the very next button next to select subject, that will go ahead and show you, depending on what preference you left it on, what you're going to get. So what I mean by that, if we go up to the top here, we have different ways of viewing. So the first one is the onion skin view, which lets you dial back in the background and dial back out the background so you can kind of see what you're getting. That one I use sometimes. I don't use it that much anymore. Marching ants is pretty much useless. That's not going to do me much. That doesn't show hair. That doesn't show much. Overlay is really good because it can really show me, unless the subject's red, it can really show me what I'm missing. So it's showing me all those little things I've already pointed out that are missing. On black, that can be helpful. On white, that could be helpful depending on what you need. Black shows me what the mask looks like. So I can see I've got this hard edge mask on her hair that's not very good. And of course, on layers shows it to me the way it would look composited if I were to accept it the way it is now, which I'm not because it's not ready yet. So let's go back to on overlay. That will show me a good example. Now, the next tool that you're going to use is in the upper left-hand corner. It's the Refine Edge tool. It's the second brush. And what that brush is wonderful for is things like hair. So you notice that there's a plus sign right in the circle. That plus sign is to allow me to tell it what the old background was. In other words, the sky, the old background. So that would be outside the hair. Then once I click and hold down with that plus sign outside of the subject, then it knows, oh, remove all of this stuff that looks like the plus sign. In other words, wherever you clicked. So when I start dragging into her hair, it just removes, and by the way, it brings back some of the hair that was missing. It just removes all that gray from the hair that was mixed in. And I can come down here and do the same thing. I can go under the arm. There's some hair there. There's that little piece in the side there, just cutting all that old background out. Now, these little nubs coming off her leg down here, that's not going to be a good refine edge brush feature. That's going to be the next tool, which is the brush tool. Basically, you're just adding in or subtracting out what you don't want. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and subtract those little nubs sticking out from her leg that were really those bushes. And of course, you'd zoom in and do a better job than what I'm doing here. But that looks like a pretty good image. I'm going to zoom in just a little. Go to the eye here, make sure I'm not missing any of her eye. I was kind of worried about that selection, but it looks pretty good. You can see the hair. And of course, now you can zoom back out and you can see it in all the other modes that we talked about. So you can see it on black and you can see how much softer that mask is now, especially around the hair, thanks to the Refine Edge brush. All right, the next thing is that we want to see it on layers. We want to see what it would look like on this background. And this is where we would zoom in and see if that hair is okay. It looks pretty darn good to me. But I just want to point out some things in case it doesn't look good because every image is different. Higher resolution images are usually going to do better than lower resolution images. Images with contrast are going to do better than lower contrast images. So if you're in that situation where it's not looking right, let me show you some sliders that you might want to try out. One of the first things I do is if it's not looking good as it is, this is looking pretty good, not a whole lot to do, but I would go in and I would, and by the way, I'm looking at the edge of her shirt here and I can see a little bit of transparency there that shouldn't be there. Let's paint that shirt back in. Got a little crazy with the Refine Edge brush and was painting away some of her arm, so we can bring that back. All right, now, first thing I would do is I might turn on Smart Radius and do a little edge detection. And as you can see, look at what it's doing to the hair. Depending on where you drag this, that may bring back some of the hair you were missing or make it worse. It depends on what you do. I can see right here at the top of her head, that should probably come back in a little. So what I'm really saying here is check the edges of your image to make sure they look the way you want them to look. Now, the next thing you might do is shift edge. If you still see like a white halo around the entire subject, then you might bring the shift edge to the left. That will, I'm going to exaggerate it. That will cut into the image. And you usually don't want to do 1 pixel. I've done a ton here. That's too much. But you can cut into the image by that 1 pixel, that one little stroke that's going all the way around the image, and eliminate it that way. She doesn't really need it, so I'll back off of it a little bit. And then last but not least, if all else fails, in other words, it still looks like a little bit of haze or a little bit of something left over, the next thing you might do is decontaminate the colors. So what that does, and that makes a big difference in this image, what that does, and it makes a big bad difference right there. Let's paint that back in. All right, what that will do, and you have a slider for it now, is it's making a great difference on the hair, but I'm not really happy with what it's doing around the edge of her. So what I might do is pull back on that a bit, because now there's an amount slider for decontaminate. What decontaminate is supposed to do is when you photograph someone, whatever is around them is being reflected onto them. So if she was shot on a green screen, for example, like I am right now, the green would be on the edges of my clothes or in my hair. So decontaminate colors looks at the background and tries to remove that background color from the subject. But sometimes, as we were seeing on her shirt, it could actually introduce artifacts. So that's why they've added a slider to pull back, so that maybe you don't need as much and you can pull back from it. Before it used to be on or off, you had no choice, but now you can pull it back a little bit and get just the effect you want. So I would, again, just quickly look around, make sure we aren't getting any more of those weird artifacts anywhere else around her. If so, I would just use the brush to paint back in that edge that would be missing. The hair looks great, everything else looks great. So now what's next? Before you click OK, the next thing you want to do is make sure you change your output to. That's the section right here at the bottom. Output to, by default, outputs to a new selection. Now, because I made some changes here, new selection is not a choice. And what that would simply do is just, once you click OK, it would take you back to the image with the marching ants. And then you'd have to figure out what to do next. I like to definitely do new layer with layer mask. What that will do is give me a brand new layer, leave my old layer intact so I have something to always go back to, and it will, Colleen St. Clair, you're jumping ahead, but she's asking about, okay, how do we match the light and all that to the image? We haven't got out of this yet. Let's get out of this first. What that will do is give me a brand new layer with a layer mask that I can still, if I miss something, go back and edit. So I'm going to click OK. And that will give me, like I said before, here's the old layer, still there, still intact. You still got it. It turns it off by default. Gives you the new layer with your background cut out. And if we zoom out, we can see it. And we can move her around because she is on a layer. And keep in mind, she's still got grass for feet, so don't move her up too high. But you can move her around, get her in place. Her hair is blending into that background now. We can see it everywhere we move it. Just don't move it too tall because we didn't go down past her knees. All right, next thing. So at that point, you've done what the topic of this was, which is remove the background or swap the background. Now the question then becomes, how do we make it look more realistic, especially when lighting and shadows and things like that? Shadows is a whole different story. That depends on what's casting the shadow and what direction you would have to usually add that shadow in manually. All kinds of techniques to paint in a shadow on another layer. Usually you can duplicate the image, lay it down using free transform or distort, and then fade it out to kind of use the image as a shadow. We're not gonna do shadows right now, but I'm gonna do color. So she's definitely photographed in a different environment, not as warm as this environment, not as dull as this background. So we need to tone her down a bit so that she kind of blends more into the background she's on. So how do we do that? There's a quick, easy method for this. Keep in mind, it did give you this mask. It gave you this beautiful mask cutout already for this image. Now I'm going to put it back in place just for a second here. Let me move the whole thing back over where I had it. Oh, moved it a little too much. Maybe right there. All right, close enough. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to use that mask to cut out a silhouette from the background. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down the Command key on the Mac, PC Control key, and click on the mask. That will make a selection of that layer with its mask. Now I'm going to go down to the background and use that selection. Wait, I might be doing this the wrong way. Hold on for a sec. Yep. Use the selection and duplicate the layer of just what's selected. In other words, just her cutout. So Command J, PC Control J. And what that will give me is this, a silhouette of just her. Now, I'm going to take that silhouette layer and put it on top of everything. So it just moved it all the way up, and we can call this color, because that's what it's going to be, our color layer. All right, what do we want to do with the color layer? I don't want the bush, I don't want the trees, I don't want the cloud. I want an average of all of these colors so that this becomes one solid color. Well, luckily there's a filter to do that. If I go to my filter menu, come down to blur and choose average, it will average out all those colors and make it one solid color, like so. And this is really the tone of that background, because we took the background, moved it up, and did it. All right, now let's go in and turn on our other layers. Oops, not that one, this one. All right, so we got our silhouette on top, and now all we need is a blending mode to blend it in, and we're going to need to tone down that blending mode because it's going to be too much. So blend modes now in Photoshop are live, so I can just hover over the image and see which blend mode I want. I know which one I want. It's the color mode at the very bottom. I choose color, and that's going to definitely give us that tone on her, but it's too much. The rest of the image is not that gray, not that dull. So all we now do is take that color layer and lower the opacity to around the 20s or 30s. Somewhere in that ballpark usually will get you where you want to be. So this is without the color layer. If you look at her skin, you look at her tone, she's a lot brighter. Turn on the color layer, it dulls her down. If you want her to dull down a little bit more, just increase the opacity. So that kind of matches her more evenly to that background that she's on. I think that's still too much. Let me dial it down a bit more. There we go, something like that. Now again, if you want to change lighting, you want to do all of that, then I would recommend going into the camera raw filter and using the radio filters with exposure and controlling where you put light. So for example, if I needed to lighten up her face some more, I would just quickly, I would convert it to a smart object layer or smart filter layer, but then I would go into camera raw. I would then grab the radio filter, I would set it to exposure, which it already is, and I would just dial in, and we need to do the inside, not the outside. There we go. And now I could dial in a brighter her. So if I needed to put some light on her face, I could very easily and very quickly and very non-destructively if I convert that to a smart filter layer first. Click OK, and her face got a little bit brighter, but because I didn't do it as a smart filter layer, I don't have any way to go back to it. I'd have to undo it and do it again. So let's do it the right way. But even if you go back, that's before, that's after. Just adding that little extra bit of light to it. So let's undo it. Let's go back to the camera or the filter, convert for smart filters. There we go. And now it's basically made a smart object of that layer. And now we can go in and run that same camera raw filter again. And we're going to do the same radio filter again. Brighten up her face just a bit. And we're doing it on the inside. But now when I click OK, that becomes a re-editable thing in the layers panel. So if I think it's too bright, just double click, go right back to that radio filter, click right back on it, and dial it back down a bit. Now click OK, and I'm right back to where I was. So again, without it, she's darker. With it, she's a bit lighter. So all kinds of things you can do to tone it in once you get it the way you, once you get the background cut out, you can get it in position. You can do all kinds of things to make it match the new background that you're putting it on. And of course, that will all vary by the background. Okay, so someone's asking me a question. Will product A ever get? And the answer is maybe. So someone's asking me, I think it's Maurice is like, will InDesign ever get some of the Photoshop effects? I don't know, maybe. Go to adobe.uservoice.com and ask for it. So the more things that you ask for on User Voice, and the more people that ask for it, the more likely you are to get it. Voicing it here on a live stream or on a forum or on a bulletin board somewhere else, maybe. But if you go to User Voice, that's where the engineers actually look for features to put in. And the more people that vote and rank features up, the higher they get on the list, the more likely they are to get in. So if you really want to see Photoshop effects in InDesign, go make your case. All right, so with that said, no, I don't have that kind of pull. I can go vote for your feature if you go write it up. I can do that for you, but that's about it. All right, so with that said, thanks everyone for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. I had fun showing you just a quick way of cutting out your images in Photoshop, showing you a couple of the new things in Photoshop CC for 2019, and of course, Colleen helping you blend it in and make it look better on the new background. So with that said, cheers everybody, thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Tomorrow I will be on the Lightroom Facebook page, and of course all the other places I stream. Same time tomorrow, so 10 a.m. Pacific time, Lightroom. We're going to be talking about Lightroom on mobile. So we're talking about Lightroom on the iPad. So with that said, cheers everybody. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one. Bye.